Part of the work in being a permaculture nursery or doing permaculture work, if I want to use that term, is a key element is observation. Observe and interact, a foundational permaculture principle. So in this video, I want to talk about some observations I was making this morning around water and how it's moving in our landscape. And so maybe that's useful to you. I'd love to hear your ideas as we talk too. What I'm interested in observing and sharing notes with all of you is around the idea of water. It's a very important theme in the work that we do. I mean, obviously water is life. And so here we are in this moment. You can see a couple things happening. You can see snow on the ground and you can see open water, unfrozen water. We're at one of those edge moments, climate-wise or weather-wise, where yesterday we had some thaw. We had above freezing temperature. We had a little bit of sun. Last night things froze. And so when you have those moments where there's transitions between freezing and thawing, or right before a rain, right after a rain, dynamism in weather, it's a great opportunity to look at things and try to decode what's actually happening. And so when I see snow on the ground with a crusty ice, it was a good freeze, and I see water that has zero ice in it, there's some questions that come up for me. See snow and then open water. Why is it that this water is completely thawed and open, but other water in the landscape is pretty solidly frozen? Obviously, containers that have water would be colder because they're less insulated by the earth. But this pond, which is only about 20 or 30 yards away, has a pretty solid crust of ice on it. So there's something unique happening with that one body of water here. What I believe I'm observing here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that this particular little body of water is receiving input, flow. Maybe it's a very small amount. It's probably not a significant amount because I don't see anything moving. But there's water coming into this that more than likely is passing underground. It's getting warmed up as it travels, and as it enters this pond and its overflows, it's warmer than the air around. It's even warmer than the surface of the soil, because as we know, the deeper you go, the more stable the earth is in its temperature. It's well above freezing a few feet down. And so I'm wondering if this pond is now being at least slightly or lightly spring-fed. That wouldn't be crazy to believe or to come to the conclusion of, because over the last number of years, we've been working on creating more and more pond systems and drainage systems upslope. And in fact, the large pond in our neighbor's property, which I'd like to look at in a moment, that's only going to get more and more water charge through this minor valley. So to think that there's excess water moving through the soil down below and coming up through these holes and these openings in the soil with some level of warmth, enough to resist freezing and crusting after a decently cold night. It's interesting. Now, is that such a powerful aha moment that's like, okay, now we've got our drinking water, we can sip right out of there, it's all spring-fed? Nope. But it's an interesting observation. It's something valuable to catalog in the mind. If you're the type of person that likes to take notes, that's great. Maybe you've got a journal where you write down the date, what the air temperature is, what it was as a low overnight, and the fact that you see things in your landscape, areas in your landscape where water is completely unfrozen. That's noteworthy at the very least. I think something that I'm trying to convey in this video beyond just, oh, there's water coming out from underground, I think, and it's cold out, so that's interesting. More than that, hopefully a lot more than that, is the idea that we all can be making observations in our landscape. So when there's a transition between cold and warm, wet and dry, all those sorts of things, different times of year, that first frost in the year. In fact, I talked about that in a past video, walking around after the very first frost and observing where it didn't freeze, where it did freeze, what was happening there, what areas were insulated. That's all available to you. I have no formal training. I think that's very, very clear when you watch these videos. But we all have eyes and ears, hopefully, and other modes of observation and data recording that we have access to that are all very informal and require no training or introduction from other folks. Just a reminder that you can do that if you want. In the spirit of wanting to learn a little bit more as I walk around here, while we wait for things to thaw out. I look at this other pond, which has a little bit less watershed feeding into it, but it still has some. And I think there's some good information that can be pulled from here. Okay, so it's icy. So this is definitely not getting as much water from underground pushing up into it or laterally into it. But on the east side, I'm seeing more thawed material happening. It has equal exposure to the sun throughout the day. So I don't know that it's that it got warmer there yesterday. It could be that the soil just was a little bit warmer. It could be that that rock absorbed a little more sun warmth yesterday and buffered this little section from freezing. But I also think because there's a channel here where water is flowing in, and I know that the landscape off to the east is awfully wet, I wonder if there's a little bit of water pushing in from underground over here. That doesn't say much to me as far as, okay, that now I know exactly what to do over here for the next step. But it's more information to work with. It's more of just an overall understanding of what's happening in the landscape. Now I'm up in our neighbor's property, so I've moved up watershed, and there's a lot more observation to be made here. Again, crusty, icy on the soil. Some of these channels that I've been starting to rough sketch, very, very lightly rough sketch for the overflow state of the pond that we dug. I can see ice and crust in some areas, and just as I had suspected, here, nice and icy, over here, open water. The last week or two, I've been noticing every time I walk through here, regardless of if there was rain or snow, this particular part of the walkway is awfully wet, and there's standing water right next to it. I would suspect there's a fair bit of excess water because we've made these swales that are absorbing rain and snow. They're leaking their water out somewhere roughly in here and into this channel. And seeing the fact again that it is not frozen in that particular spot leads me from observation to maybe a rough idea of a conclusion that water from under slight pressure is releasing through the soil somewhere in here and into this spot. It's a good opportunity to catalog that and come back to it and see if that actually pans out over time. And it's definitely been cold enough that this pond has a good crust on it. No way in a million years would you catch me walking on that, and I hope no animals try. It's only about an inch or two thick. I wonder what those little splotches are. That looks like the surface of the moon there. Maybe a bird pooped when it was flying overhead. Walking along the edge of this pond where it's very low organic matter and been exposed to very cold nights. This is solidly frozen, which is pretty interesting to see. It's going to be interesting over time as the pond swells. Are these edges particularly cold in the winter, or can we help facilitate keeping them warmer with rocks and mulch and things like that? That's for another day. So seeing this pond in a pretty frozen, crusty state, maybe we'll see if it thaws out today. I bet the surface will thaw a little bit. It'll be interesting to observe where it thaws first. That'll tell me where the soil is warmest, where there may be dark stones absorbing sun energy, or maybe water is coming in from just below the surface. So there's an opportunity to learn from that. One thing that I saw the other day, and I've started chipping away at working with it, is we had a very, very cold night with some snow. And right around here, I saw no snow and I saw standing water. And so I think we actually have a legit minor spring starting to evolve right roughly in here. It makes sense because if I go upslope with my eye, this is all artificial. This is subsoil from the pond, but there's a lull in the landscape going up many acres. And so underground water is building pressure and it's releasing somewhere in here. And what was happening is I took a shovel. Well, first of all, that water was bleeding out. It was starting to erode through the soil. You can see where it was running here and pouring right into the water. So it was cutting soil and aiming directly into the water. And our goal with permaculture principles is to slow it, spread it, and sink it. So rather than having the water rush right into the pond, I bermed it up a little bit and I cut a little channel to send it along over here. And that holds the option now we can develop more and more plantings along the side to hydrate them, and the landscape can absorb more water and let that bleed into the pond through filtration and slowly. And here, just as I thought it would do, where that water is coming out of the landscape, just seemingly out of nowhere. Somewhere right in here, water just starts existing. None of this froze overnight. So this would be cool to see when we get a very, very cold, down in the teens, low 20s. Does this remain completely unfrozen? That'll indicate to me that it's a spring, probably under a little bit of pressure. Another observation I'm definitely making right now is that holding an ice cold phone with a bare hand in the morning on a freezing morning is uncomfortable. So that may be the end of this video, probably long enough. But the word of encouragement from this is, if you feel like, hey, I haven't gotten any training with this stuff. I never went to a class. I'm not sure where to begin. Begin with where you are. Start where you are. Start small. And when there's a freeze or a thaw, when there's some rain or some snow, heavy winds, dry spell, what do you see in the landscape? B, you can ask certain specific questions and look for answers. You could also just be open to what sort of questions can I ask as you walk around, or just simply look and see. But the more we walk and observe, the more opportunity there is for positive interaction with the landscape. For today, there's no huge project that's going to come out of the fact that I saw water not frozen in one spot and frozen in another. But the next time I come out with a shovel to do some work, I've got a lot more information to build from. And the more I do that, the deeper it all gets, and the more you can build from it, and the more informed the decisions you can make based on what feels like intuition, but it's actually a pretty large catalog of embedded information in the mind. It kind of builds into your body too. You just fundamentally begin to understand a landscape the more you look at it and ask those questions. So that's my morning observation. Now I'm going to go interact with the wood stove so that my fingers thaw out. And hopefully wherever you are, when there's a transition or an inflection moment of an edge of things happening in the weather, there's some fruitful information that you can get from your landscape, or at the very least, a pleasant wander out and about. Thanks for watching.